Israel's new Justice Minister Yariv Levin announcing a reform program including a derogation clause allowing parliamentary members a vote to override decisions of the Supreme Court. And joining us now from the Bar-Ilan University Faculty of Law is Professor Itai סימן-טוב. So Itai, what's this new reform saying exactly?
Okay, so first of all, it's important to note that Minister Levin said this is only the first stage, so we might expect even more. But the three major things that currently Minister Levin proposes is one, as you said, an override clause, meaning that a mere 61 parliament members out of 120, which is something that the coalition always has, could override a decision by the Supreme Court, and in fact, immunize the legislation in advance from being reviewed by the court at all. So this is one very important aspect. The second one is changing the judicial appointment system to make it more political. And the third one is politicizing the appointment of legal counsels to the ministries of the government.
And Itai, you're calling it a first step, but critics of the Levin judicial reform proposal say it's a death knell for Israeli democracy. Is that an exaggeration?
I think not. I think that there is real danger here. But I should start by saying that, in addition to being a constitutional law professor, I'm also a legislation and parliamentary professor, and I believe in parliaments, and I believe in the principles that the elected representatives of the people should decide on policies. And this is what the minister is telling us. That's merely what they want to ensure. But the problem is that this is not what they're doing. What they're proposing and the end result might be is that in the end of the day, we'll have a parliament that has no checks and balances and no review over its decisions and could threaten human rights, even the most fundamental constitutional rights, without any possible of review. And the problem is that you have to understand that in the Israeli regime, who actually controls parliament is not the parliament, it's the government. And the government can actually pass any legislation they want by imposing their majority and coalition restraint over the members of parliament, and getting a 61, which is the threshold that they propose for the override clause, is something that can almost be automatically done by any government that is resolved enough to pass legislation that they're willing to do. And basically, the danger here is that we'll have politicians that have no checks and balances over them. And maybe if I can just add one more background explanation, is that in many countries we have various types of checks and balances, and judicial review is only one of them. For example, you might have two houses of parliament, you might have a veto power by the president, you might have a federal system where the federal government and the state governments balance each other. You have, like in the EU, that you have a supranational body, you have international courts. Israel does not have any of those things. So basically, the only thing currently restraining the Israeli government is the Supreme Court. Taking away the power of the Supreme Court is therefore quite dangerous.
And it actually brings me to this, the basic laws of Israel, the equivalent of a constitution. Doesn't Levin's proposals to allow a simple 61 Knesset majority to overturn a basic law weaken its very concept?
Yeah, so some people and some constitutional theorists say that override clause, in principle, is contrary to the idea of a constitution, because the whole idea of a constitution is to enable limited government and make sure that government does not violate constitutional rights.
Professor Itai סימן-טוב, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.